up?
This is SeerNova Podcast, Season 2, Episode 16. We have Scott Harris King with us. First time ever, too.
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
I see Green Monster on your shirt. Is that referring to
Yeah, it's a Red Sox shirt that I won. I won a Jumbotron dance competition at Fenway Park, and this was one of the prizes that I got for that.
You should, whatever website, whatever Kickstarter you run, you should just find that video online someplace.
We've tried to get it, but we can't. Don't have any footage of it, unfortunately.
But we'll have to look at some point to see if I'm trying to think of where the archives for old live television, like sports, they get stored someplace. So it's like you just gotta find that footage someplace, because that would be an awesome. It's like, I'm this guy. I'm a champion, is what I am.
What was your dance move that made you win?
Well, I didn't even realize there was a competition going on. I knew that people were dancing, so everyone was dancing, and I didn't know I was on the Jumbotron because it was behind me. So I stopped dancing, and everyone around me was like, "No, keep dancing." So the winning move was I pulled my hat off and I started spanking myself with it. So nice. That's my go-to dance move now.
If I go to weddings, if I go to graduations, that's what I'm doing.
Funerals, yeah.
Got to keep those funerals lit. No, that's awesome.
Okay. Well, besides being a winner of that, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. I'm Scott Harris King, and I make comics under the umbrella name, the Crimebuster Comics. And I mostly write, but I also do some drawing. So I have 3 ongoing series now. I've got the Crimebusters. Issue 7 is going to be coming out soon. And then I've got Quest, which is an epic fantasy series. And I'm just about ready to do issue 5 of that on Kickstarter. And then I've also got Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam number 3, and my artist is currently working on issue 3 of that, which hopefully will be out later this year also on Kickstarter. So pretty much write all of them. And I again work with different artists for the interior work on a lot of them. I do some of the variant covers myself, and then I do I have a flatter as well because I'm colorblind. But other than that, I do the finished colors, I do the lettering, the distribution, the Kickstarters, everything else myself.
Oh, that is super interesting that you're colorblind and do the coloring.
Yeah. So that's why I have a flatter who does the flats. I don't like a sort of modern digital coloring. I think because I'm colorblind, a lot of times it gets muddied with all this sort of blending and the digital effects and stuff. So I like old school, classic sort of Bronze Age color schemes.
The half, what is it called? Half tones?
Exactly. So I get the base colors in, and a lot of times when I get them from her, I then change them because I like them to be really high contrast. I think, again, because of the color blindness, I don't like complementary colors. I can't really see things if they're too close together. So again, I like the really, really bright, vibrant colors. And then I just do sort of, simple half-tone shading on it. And so it has a look of sort of like the Bronze Age books.
I love that because that's a big thing where I think it's a really big number. 1 in 12 men are some form of color blindness, even if it's only partial. And so that's super interesting that your when you get them, you're looking, and if you don't see the high contrast with your color blindness, you're like, oh, I need to fix this. And I like that because that's something where I build websites, for example. And if I'm building the website, I look at it, I'm like, I can read that. But there's actually tools online where I'll go and be like, oh, if you're this type of colorblind, because there's 5 different types. If you're this type, this right here, you can't see it at all. It just looks like all gray. That's all this is. And so it's actually interesting because your comics probably pop more in general, but they also probably stand out for the fact that, if you're colorblind, you're going to notice them drastically different than a standard comic that's not taking that into account. So it's super interesting.
Yeah, a lot of times if I have questions, I have my wife. She does sort of a proofread for me before I print, but she also looks at the colors, so she can tell me if I've gotten something wrong. But usually I can tell if there's a question. I'll call her over and I'll be like, "Did I just color this person green?" Because that does happen where because I'm red green colorblind. If I'm
Yeah.
doing skin tone instead of doing a pink, sometimes I'll do a light green because they look the same color to me.
Oh,
So
that's
my wife
crazy.
like sort of check everything for me.
I just realized that if somebody ever looked sick, you'd be like, "He looks normal to me."
Yeah. So yeah, so she double checks everything. I mean, we sometimes have different tastes in colors because I like things really, again, really bright and vibrant.
Yeah.
Sometimes I pick colors that she thinks are just hideous. But you know, I gravitate towards. I'm an old school comic collector. You know, Bronze Age, Silver Age, Golden Age. Those are the comics that I really like. So I like having that look anyway, and I think I'm drawn to those because of the coloring.
That's super cool. I'm curious if do you think, or have you noticed that the halftone makes it easier to see colors in contrast because you're colorblind? Like, is that you know what I mean? Like, does that help with the visuals of seeing shades?
Um, I would not directly, but more sort of doing that instead of again sort of the modern coloring. There's certain trends in modern digital coloring I don't care for. There's a lot of like complementary colors where it'll have a panel and it'll be like the characters color sort of a light blue and then the background's a different shade of blue and then the deep background's like a darker shade of blue
Oh,
or like a purple.
the monotone shades.
And,
Yeah.
that makes it really hard for me to see anything. So just sort of doing it the way I do it, I like to make sure that everything's visible. When I am working with, sometimes I'll have colorists that do everything. Like if I'm doing a cover, I'll sometimes hire a colorist to do all the colors. And one thing that drives me crazy about a lot of modern colorists is they're almost a little too technical with the lighting. So like if there's a sun in the background, they'll be like, well, the character's backlit, and then they'll have everything, the character will be in shadow and you can't see them. So I always tell my artists, I'm like, imagine that the reader's face is the primary light source on the character. So it's fine to have shadows because there's light behind them, but I want everything in the front to be visible so that we can see what's happening. So it's not muddy or confused or anything like that.
That's super cool. Something I learned about anime was that in order to save production, the Japanese illustration teams focused more on the face than the rest of the body. That's why they have like such exaggerated face. That's why like what was it, Astro Boy, which was like the first one that kind of emulated the US type of cartoons, had the big round eyes, but then they slowly started changing where like Sailor Moon had giant eyes, but then like the Dragon Ball Z, Naruto have these sharp pointed eyes. So it's like something interesting that by making sure the face is always lit up, you're getting that same effect, because that was the reason they chose to focus on the face, was that they could draw less changes on the overall image and express a lot of what's going on right here and save a lot more on drawing time, but they also got the point across better too. So that's why a lot of animes are like beloved, is because of that facial expression. So that's actually super interesting that you prioritize that even with stuff like backlighting.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm really old school. I mean, I started reading comics in 1984, and so like Jim Shooter's Marvel was how I got into comics, and he always talked about how it is clear when you read the Marvel books from that time period, the clarity, so that anyone reading at any reading level, they come in, they understand what's happening. So that's really important to me, is like with the art and the writing, people need to understand what's happening. When I did my first issue of Crimebusters, a lot of my backers were friends and family who didn't necessarily read comics, and I thought everything was super clear. And I had a couple people that were like, they just had never read comics before and they didn't understand how panel to panel worked and stuff like that. So, I mean, I do sometimes do things that when I'm working with other artists, if I think there's anything potentially unclear about the art, I will put it in the dialogue or I'll put something in there to say what's happening. I know that's not really in vogue these days, where people think the art should always tell everything. But for me, I'm like, I want to make sure the reader understands what they're looking at. And if I'm like even 10% unsure that someone will do it, I'll have a character be like, oh my goodness, there's a bomb or something, to make sure that the readers know, oh, that what that person drew over here, that's a bomb, you know. So
that's also cool. I'm liking a lot of what you're describing, because it is something that I feel like does get neglected. Like, the reason why some people think that comics are stagnating is because they're in their own little bubble of, here's the 3 comic book friends that I know and nobody else likes comics, where you're trying to make it so that anybody, even if they haven't read comics before, it is very clear what's going on. Like, people, like, don't get me wrong, there's films and TV shows that like over exaggerate the idea of like, hey, there's that very obvious thing that we all can tell by looking at it. But there are times where that's necessary to make sure that those who are not engulfed in the universe that you've created can understand what's going on. Like, especially if, like, let's say that bomb looks unique because it's in a world where there's different physics or there's different mechanics or different technology. And so it doesn't look like a stick of dynamite or something. Like, it looks like a bomb in your universe. So having somebody out loud declare what it is makes perfect sense too, for various new things that you might be introducing a reader to, as well as, again, to like readers who don't typically read comics, and now you're trying to get them to consume something they've never consumed before. So that's super interesting. Is there anything else like that you have done in your creative wake? Like, you the colors already super interesting, like having these high contrast colors. Now you're mentioning you mentioned the focus on the face, and now you're mentioning like declaring stuff as well, like pointing stuff out. Is there anything else like that you've kind of noticed?
I mean, again, there's just like, it's because I come from a place where like Bronze Age books from the 70s and early 80s is where I got into it. That's how I think of comics. So one thing that I do that I don't see a lot these days, and it feels like the last, say, 20 years, people have really gotten away from thought balloons. But I use thought balloons in all my comics. Everybody's got thought balloon, when it's appropriate. But for me, it's like a fundamental part of comics that you can get stuff out of thought balloons that other mediums can't do. If you have a movie scene, one person's talking or nobody's talking. In a comic book scene, I can have these 2 people talking, and I can have these 2 people over here thinking about something different or reacting to what they're hearing in their thoughts. And you can do things different in comics that way. So, I mean, the thought balloons, I feel like, are more common actually in the indie space than in the mainstream stuff these days, but it's still not something I see all that much in a lot of the comics that I get. But it's just part of the language for me. So I don't feel like I'm doing anything particularly interesting with it, but compared to, I guess, the current sort of status quo, it's a little bit different.
No, that's definitely cool. Our comic ink, we didn't end up using thought balloons, but when we first had it drawn, this was the first comic we ever actually published and released. We were working on a different comic, but got held up. And when we started getting this comic drawn, we had a great artist, but at the time, when Greg was writing the script, it was written in what's it called, storyboard format, like for film. And because of that, there's certain things that you can capture in a scene for film that you can't really capture and get the full zest of it in a comic panel. So because of this, after we had already paid the artist, it's already drawn. I'm looking through this before it gets lettered, and I'm like, you're not going to be able to fit all that text in there. Like, what's going on here? And we ended up going through the whole thing, and we're like, how could we fix this? And instead, we're like, what if we eliminate all the text and just have an inner dialogue describing like thoughts going on during this intro scene, and then we'll move into the rest of the comic. And so that's what we ultimately did. And after we released that, we released several since, and every time we released a new comic, they're always like, where's Ink 2? Like, that was like the big thing. Like, they really liked that style. And so, yeah, when Ink 2 came out and now Ink 3, like, that was like, it became like the style of that comic almost, where we don't do that in all of our comics. But I really do like the idea of like sharing what's inside the characters' minds, because you can really delve into the emotions, kind of like how like I mentioned, the anime with the faces, that's how they get the emotions out. by giving those inner dialogues, you can also go like, oh, like he's not just standing there like absorbing this. Like there is something going on else, beyond that. So that's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think of myself as a writer first and foremost. When I'm working on the comics, I'm thinking of it in terms of writing. I've definitely run into things like you just described. Most of the artists I work with, I do full script. But I'll send them the full script, and then sometimes it'll be, 2 or 3 months later, they're sending me a thumbnail for page 19 or something. And I remember sort of what the story is, but I'm not great about getting the thumbnail and then comparing it to the script. So I'll look at their thumbnails and I'll be like, yeah, I can follow what's happening. It looks great. And then when I go to add the script, I realize, oh, there's supposed to be 2 characters in this panel. They only drew one of them. These 2 characters are supposed to be talking, but he put them on the wrong side. So their word balloons are opposite. And then I end up having to rewrite all the dialogue and the thought balloons to fit the page, kind of like, like a Stan Lee, Marvel style in the 60s. And sometimes it's a huge hassle. And then other times it actually works out better because I'm like, well, I can't fit in 65 words of dialogue here. I've got to figure out how to say the same thing in 12 words because there's only this much space. And so sometimes it ends up, it makes it interesting. But yeah, it's an interesting process working with artists in that way.
That's definitely true.
So before we keep going, I saw you at IC3.
Yes, I saw you too, and I was walking by your table. I only got out from behind my booth once to like go down. You were in the hallway, weren't you? Like, yeah, I think you were talking with somebody, and I was like, I don't want to interrupt, but then I didn't get back there. So
yeah, I saw the one time I saw you was I was going to the bathroom. Like I think it was at the end of the day because I didn't go to the bathroom at all. I was like standing at the table the entire 8 hours, and I was like, oh my god, because Dylan was going around to like everybody, he was like trying to meet like all the people that were there.
Yeah, where were you? Like in the
I was in the main room. If you went through the main doors to get into the main room, I was in the back right corner, all the way in the back. There was a guy. I don't know if you remember the main room, but there was a guy in the corner who was selling a comic called Dope. And if you got to his table and then just sort of went to the left, I was there. I was across from. I just blanked. That's embarrassing. The guy that does Skin of My Teeth, Jeff Lawrence. We were right across from each other. I do a lot of shows with him because he's from up here in New England. So we end up tabling next to each other quite a lot, actually.
That's funny. I was actually the one walking around trying to meet everybody. I probably stood 2 feet from your table and I just didn't get to your table because I ended up, I hit everybody in the hallway, everyone in the side rooms, and then the hallway outside the main room. I then hit the front row of the main room, a couple down the left side, and then I hit the whole right side, but I ended on the outside tables. I never got a chance to go to the inside tables because there was just too many people there. I have literally like a bag of all the cards I got from there. Yeah. I reached out to a huge chunk of them already. Some of them have gotten back to me already, but yeah, it was such a cool event. But yeah, there were so many people there.
There were so many. Yeah, I had some similar. Like I tried to get to everybody, but I was trying to like. I basically took half of the money that I got in there and spent it at other people's tables. So I went out and I walked down the hallway. I went in all the little side rooms, and then in the main room though that I was in, I did half of it, and I ran out of money, and so And it was like the last hour. So I basically ran around the other half of the room and I hardly got a chance to actually see anything there. So there was probably 30 or 40 tables that I just did a speed walk past and didn't really get a chance to look at it.
Yeah, I kept going to all the tables room by, like I told Greg, I'm like, listen, I'm going to run around real quick, kind of see everybody, and then I'll be back in a minute. I go and I'm like, I'll start right from the beginning. The first room in the hallway. So I get all the way down there. And as I'm leaving the room, I'm like, holy crap, it's been a half an hour. I'm like, it was one room. I'm like, there's like 7 more rooms, the whole hallway and the main room and the other hallway. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm going to do it faster this next time. So I see the person in the hallway, then I go to the next room. And then I'm like, all right, we'll be real quick. 40 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God, I did it again. I'm like, there were so many cool creators. Like, and I think one of the cool things too, and I mentioned it to some of the people there, was because we're all indie creators, they all market in unique ways, because this isn't the only convention they go to. They go to other conventions where they're competing against a comic book store or a larger artist, or like toys and food and all this other stuff you're competing with. And so a lot of them have like unique ways to market themselves. So there were so many tables where I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. And I took a picture of it. I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. And I have like a bunch of like papers somewhere. Yeah, here they are. A bunch of stuff. Like one of the coolest ones I got was this guy here, the single paper Zine. And it's literally one piece of paper just folded up. And I'm like, and then the inside's a poster. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. I'm stealing that idea. And the guy's like, yeah, I'll send you the, what's it called? Template for it. So it was super cool. It was very awesome. I'm glad you at least got to see at least some of the people. I know, like, I totally get it. It was impossible to see everybody. It was crazy.
Yeah, that was fun though. So you filled out our form.
I did.
Because we give people homework before we. And one of your things that you would like to talk about is what makes a story matter. So what does a story? What does make a story matter? Do you think?
Well, I mean, for me, like, I think stories always have to be about something, or else it's not actually a story. So, like, when I talk to people to try and explain what I mean, I basically am like, well, imagine someone's trying to tell you a story. Then they say, oh, I went to the grocery store. I mean, that's not a story. That's, and then if they could say, I went to the grocery store and a fight broke out, and that's a plot, but it's still not a story to me. But if you say, I went to the grocery store, a fight broke out, and I was afraid, like, that's a story, because now it's about how events affect someone, how they make you feel, things like that. So to me, any story has to be about something, not the plot, but have some kind of meaning that the writer's going for, or else it's not really a story. I think we've all like seen movies or TV shows or read books or comics where there's a bunch of stuff happening, but at the end of it, you're just sort of like, it didn't feel like it mattered, and it just is missing something. And a lot of those,
like the latest Star Wars.
Right, exactly. Because I mean, there's things about those that I liked, but ultimately a lot of them, like, it didn't feel like it, you could tell they didn't actually plan out the trilogy. They were just making it up as they went. It wasn't about anything. And so when people ask me what my comics are about, usually what they're asking is like plot stuff. So I'll be like, oh, Crimebusters, it's kind of like Scooby-Doo meets Cthulhu, and there's a group of student sleuths who are investigating supernatural mysteries, but unlike the classic Scooby-Doo, sometimes the monsters are real, that sort of thing. But if they really want to know what it's about, like every issue of Crimebusters, which is a self-contained story, every issue, like there's a specific story that I'm trying to tell. Like there's something specific that each story is about. And so, again, sometimes that's not what people are interested in, but sometimes I'm like, yeah, well, what it's really about is, issue 7, the one that's coming out, what it's really about is the importance of who tells your story, telling your own story, as opposed to letting someone else sort of tell your story and change the narrative and things like that. Issue 2 of Crimebusters is probably for me the most like personal thing that I've written. I wrote it right after my mother died, and it was sort of about loss and dealing with loss, and it was about the importance of sort of keeping the memory of people alive and things like that. And it was also, there was a haunted house and there was a ghost and they time traveled and, there's a murder mystery and, all of that stuff. And, they had secret gadgets. So, to me, I could have just written the plot and had all that cool stuff, but it wouldn't have landed. It wouldn't have meant anything. If it doesn't mean anything to me when I'm making it, it's not going to mean anything to anybody that's reading it. So that's kind of, where I go. I mean, I read a lot of indie comics, and what I really like about indie comics is that they are, personal. We're all passionate about these stories, or else we wouldn't be doing them. And so I think I find a lot more stories in indie comics that have meaning than I do from the mainstream, the big two. I don't actually read much from Marvel or DC anymore, but when I do, a lot of times I read them, I'm like, okay, he's punching this guy, they're punching that guy, the world blew up, whatever. None of it means anything. It doesn't mean anything to the characters. It doesn't mean anything to the people creating it. It's just completely empty. Whereas with indie comics, you can tell people put their heart into it. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I was thinking that's probably the key difference between indie and the Marvel DC worlds is that. Well, I'll clarify though too is that if an independent comic is good, then it's because it has a great story. If it's not good, it's also typically because it doesn't have a great story, and they also just wanted to draw cool stuff, and they're kind of emulating what Marvel and DC is now, not what Marvel and DC was when they were in their prime. And the thing is that back then, that was the whole point, is that each of these characters had these unique stories. When they first started, the Superman, Batman, Detective Comics, Action Comics, sure, that was just boom, pow, that was very cool, though, because it was new. But after a couple of those, you're like, okay, but why do I want to keep reading these? And the only reason to keep reading more about the same exact character is if some emotional change is occurring. And if it's not, there's no reason to follow along. That's why even shows like Gotham, that's about the villains, are interesting, because it's how the villains are emotionally feeling about what's happening and why they went evil. So it's super interesting. I wrote down all that stuff you said too, the simple, I went to the store and a fight broke out, or I went to the store, a fight broke out and I was scared. It's I do love that. That really is the important factor.
Yes, I mean, so that's kind of where I start when I'm writing my stuff. I mean, I have plot ideas where I'm like, okay, this issue, they're going to be dealing with, I've got my plots for Crimebusters, just one sentence things worked out for the next 15 issues. So I'm like, okay, they're going to go to Rome and they're going to be in the catacombs there. I know that's going to happen in issue 12, but I haven't got that far yet because I'm currently, I'm working on I'm writing issue 8 right now. So I don't know what issue 12 is actually about yet. So when I get to that point, I have to be okay, I want to have this setting and have this cool stuff because it'll be cool, but is there a reason for that? Is there a story that makes sense for me to tell using that? Because sometimes, these ideas change. By the time I get to them, the stuff that I end up writing in the issue is not at all what I originally planned. Because once I start being this is actually this, I want to tell a story about this, then I realize, well, I need a different character here. I need a different setting. I need this element to bring out, these emotions in the characters. And then it's a completely different story. So really the heart of it is what's it about? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to the characters? And then you can kind of, don't want to say it tells itself, but it tells you as a writer what you can put in, what you need to put in, and then what you need to take out and get rid of.
Yeah. I wrote. So when I first started, the whole comic thing, it was in 2014. And one night I was just bored and started writing. Dylan said, don't say that story because then that sounds weird. That's literally what happened. So, and then that's how our old flagship title, the Seer Chronicles, became a thing. And it was like over a 1,200 page like book, basically. And then I broke that up into technically storyboards, not comic script yet. And so I had all these other series like planned out after I broke it apart. And then Dylan goes in there and like adds a character or something. Like, so I have these characters in Ink 3, and they were going to be like a one-off character. It's like a farmer and these two dudes that are totally not from Of Mice and Men. And he's like, we're going to keep those people because they're cool. And I'm like, okay. So then I'm like, now I have more stories with them because I didn't even think that was going to happen. So yeah, I do that quite a bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say that there's a lot of I went to the store and fight breaks out, like in Greg's like initial stories. I was joking about this, but have you ever read Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull?
No, I don't think so.
So Ed Catmull is one of the 3 founders of Pixar, and he basically explains like everything from their beginning to their explosion and sale to Disney, and after that as well. But one of the things he talks about is how when they're writing stories at Pixar, the very first draft that they deliver is not even close to the final draft that is released and is basically a dumpster fire. And so I was joking about it because Greg's like, we still, our stories are still very close to what Greg starts with, but it is true in the sense of like, sometimes we have something like, here's a character who's just there all of a sudden. It's like, but why? Like, what's happening? Like, why are they there? Is there a reason that they're there? Can we express that somehow? And like, that's something that I like to do going through and editing a lot of the stuff that we work on together, which is like, hey, all these characters are in the same spot. Like, is there a reason? Like, like, is it just for the plot? Like you were saying, like, and a fight broke out. It's like, we're only stuck there. We need the part of like, why are they there? Why are they getting involved? Why are they doing this? Because those whys are really what, it drive the story. It's not just because we decided this is the plot arc. You can make stuff align with the plot arc you decided, but if you don't also come up with the reason why, then you can really destroy that belief that you're in this world watching this stuff happen, where now it's like, oh, it's like when you're watching a movie and something happens where they're not breaking the fourth wall, but they accidentally do because it's so obvious what they're doing. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm watching a movie. Like, I forgot that's what I was doing. Where honestly, like once you know all the main plot arcs, you could watch any movie and guess how it's going to end because there's only like 7 plot arcs. And if it doesn't align with that, then it's not going to, work well for that. So it's definitely something that if the story is good enough, there's strong enough whys, you get pulled into them because, like these emotional characters where you're like, oh, I can understand why they feel that way. I would feel that. I'd be scared, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, my other series, Quest, the creative process has turned out to be very different for me. It's got a bit more of an ensemble cast, but it's an epic fantasy series. So I started off from a different place where I'm like, okay, I want this to feel like a D&D campaign. I want it to feel like, Conan and these Bronze Age fantasy comics. So compared to like Crimebusters, it's much more plot heavy as opposed to character driven. But I still have, what the story is about and what the what the characters are motivated by, what they want to do and stuff. What I'm finding though is because it's so much more plot heavy, it's taking me much longer to be able to explore the themes and the characters. And it, I remember, back in the 80s when X-Men was like the biggest thing ever and Chris Claremont was writing. And it was sort of like you would have to read 20 or 30 or 50 issues to get progress on the subplots and when you read that many, then you see the character arcs. But if you're just reading the individual stories, it feels like you have the big fights and you have stuff and it doesn't you don't necessarily see the big picture. And I'm having that a lot more with Quest, where I'm, we jumped right into the middle of the action with issue 1. And as the action's continuing, we're sort of learning about who the characters are as we go. And I'm like right in the middle of we're about to put out issue 5, but I have an artist that's working on issue 7 right now for me, and I'm getting ready to write issue 8, and I'm like, oh, here now that I'm writing issue 8, I'm like, we're getting to the part where we actually know enough about the characters that we're starting to see more of the motivation. And whereas with Crimebusters, you're getting it in the individual issue. This is much more of a much bigger canvas. So it's taken me a little while to adjust to my own writing, to be like, the pacing is so completely different on this. I can still accomplish the same things, but it's going to take me 150 pages to get some of the character bits in that I'm able to get in the first 8 pages of this other one, because the style is so totally different.
Yeah, that's something that we recently we're starting to adjust one of our most recent comics we're working on. And the way that we're trying to focus on it now, like I mentioned a second ago, those 7 plot arcs, our goal now is that if we have a 3 or 6 part series, to have one overarching plot arc. So one of the 7 going through all of them, but each of the individual comics must also have their own plot arc. So you feel fulfilled at the end of every comic, because there's and again, that's the main difference between, old school Marvel, DC, stuff like that, and, indie comic creators, especially if they're, self-taught in the space, never went to any form of education for this stuff. We sometimes don't consider how to actually approach these long story arcs, especially because we don't have Marvel DC money to print 40 comics or 40 issues in the next 3 years. We have to figure out okay, I can only get this many done in this amount of time. How do I get a story out there that's interesting right now and build a universe so people continually want to buy more of my future comics based on my past comics? It's such a tricky balancing act to play, where you really have to, and that's why I think it's good to study stuff like that, like studying the hero of 1,000 faces. I think this is right. Campbell. Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, the hero's journey, the 7 plot arcs, the hero archetypes, all that stuff. Even if it's just super rudimentary, understanding, because just by having that little basis in the back of your mind when you're writing, it really helps to go, oh, I think I left something out of this. You know what I mean? It's this doesn't feel right. I don't know why, but I know I need to work on this somehow. Just because that something's supposed to be there, even if you're not going, oh, did I meet all the criteria for this story arc?
Yeah, and it's been really interesting for me that I have 3 different series. One of the reasons I started doing them, originally I was doing everything myself on Crimebusters. I was drawing it as well, and it was just taking me so long to draw it. I didn't have time to do any other stories, but I really wanted to tell other stories. So that's when I started hiring artists so I could work on several titles at once. And Crimebusters is a very different writing exercise, but it's also been a little bit sort of mind-bending, because trying to do every issue is a self-contained story, beginning, middle, end. Here's the mystery, here's the plot. You can read just one issue. But then I was like, well, I'm going to be collecting the trades in every 5 issues. So as I was planning it, I was like, well, I want to have a character arc. I've got 2 main characters. So we've got a character arc. Each of them has a character arc that I want to have run 5 issues, because when you read the trade, I want you to get that character arc. But I also want a plot arc that sort of goes in the background and sort of culminates in issue 5. And now I'm working on my second arc. So it's the same thing where I'm like, okay, we've got a plot arc. We've got 2 different character arcs that are happening simultaneously. And I'm trying to do this every 5 issues, but I'm also building a bigger story that theoretically will go to issue 30 if I live that long. And so every issue, I'm basically juggling 3 different time scales. What's the arc for 1 issue? What's the arc for 5 issues? What's the arc for 30 issues? And how does this story work as a puzzle piece for all 3 of those at the same time has been really tricky.
while being simultaneously interesting in and of itself. It's like, wow, that's a
Exactly.
really nice puzzle piece. Oh, and it looks really nice on this top row. And these rows go really well together to paint this beautiful picture. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. So, and since I have the two characters, I was like, well, the first 5 issues, like one of them sort of has a primary character arc that's sort of in the foreground, and the other one is sort of she has an arc as well, but it's not as pronounced. It's in the background arc. But now in the second 5-issue block, I've reversed that. So now she's got the big arc in the foreground. He's got the smaller arc in the background. Whereas with Cthulhu versus Uncle Sam, my challenges are very different. Every issue is self-contained. I don't really have an arc going on from issue to issue. And it's much more of a sort of Golden Age style superhero action. That's sort of the genre. It takes place in World War II. And when the Axis powers try to summon Cthulhu to win the war, Uncle Sam has to put together a band of heroes to save the world. And so every issue they're fighting Cthulhu or the cult or something like that. The big challenge that I ran into here again, and it goes back to everything's got to be about something, is I realized after the first issue that using Uncle Sam as my main character is really loaded. Because Uncle Sam for 200 years has been specifically the symbol of the American government. Anybody reading the comic is going to bring in all sorts of baggage one way or another, or all different ways, to the character and to the reading experience. And I realized after the first issue was pretty much about how the ideals of America can inspire people to be their best. But after people started to read it, I realized that you could read it in a very jingoistic way if you wanted to, as sort of about the government as opposed to the ideals, because of what Uncle Sam represents to some people. And then I started realizing for future issues, I had to be really careful. There's no way to avoid having some political subtext because the character is inherently political. So then I was like, I need to be saying something in every issue specifically, or else people are going to read in all sorts of things that I didn't intend to be in there. So that's been, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge. I haven't actually gotten any feedback from anyone other than people at conventions are like, so what's this about? And I tell them and they're like, screw that. Because they don't want to read that. But
that is super interesting though. I it's interesting to think about stuff like that because first off, I'm glad that you're still creating them because it's one of those things where I don't know if you remember, but Superman, his phrase was a truth, justice, and the American way, and then they changed that. I don't even know what they changed it to. Whatever it is, it was dumb that they changed it because they were trying to make it so he wasn't a symbol of what we want to strive to be. Right, that was kind of the idea, and I think that's the American way in general is this idea of trying to become as good as we can be, knowing full well that we're flawed. Right, that's the whole journey. It's the hero's journey to embodied in that type of symbolism. So it's still cool, and it is interesting though because you do get that tension or friction just by having an American flag, and you're like now I got to deal with somebody that this might mean something super positive or super negative to, and you're dealing with that tension is a interesting thing to deal with because it's comic books. We're here to make fun stories. We're here to tell stories in our head to entertain people, to let people escape from the worldly problems. And then for whatever reason, we're like, but what if we brought those problems and threw them into entertainment?
Yeah, it's because the series is it's a superhero series, but specifically sort of a golden age, set in the golden age. I throw in all the goofiest, most fun stuff I can in it. So it's got everything in it. One of the main characters is a talking dog with a machine gun. And there's in the second issue, you discover the Statue of Liberty is actually a giant mecha robot that was built to defend New York against Cthulhu attacks.
That's
And
awesome.
so like the Statue of Liberty fights Cthulhu, like in the harbor, and there's like time travel and airships and like just everything. I could just throw in everything, but again, like in the background, there's an allegory that I'm trying to tell at the same time, because I have to with that series in particular. Like I have to craft a specific. There has to be something that's being said there, or else, with other stories, like I say, if you don't have, it's not about something, people will be like, well, that wasn't about anything. But with this, if it's not about something, people will be like, oh, I know what that's about.
Yeah, they'll fill in the blank for
exactly.
you.
So we don't want to leave any blanks there. So even though I just try to make it as much of a fun sort of adventure, I also have to be really intentional in how I'm doing it.
Yeah,
So I saw that you're a backer's favorite, which we don't have that badge.
Well, I mean,
because I am slow at things, and also just project management. But I'm trying to get better at that.
Well, I mean, the secret is that I set my time frames way off in the future.
Yeah, I need to do that.
So, I mean, I've done 18 campaigns that have finished, and I've fulfilled all of them on time. There's one of them where it was really close because their printer actually broke down at the printers and they couldn't print it. And they used up all of the extra time I had. I got that shipped out like one day before it would have been late. But other than that, it's sort of like if I have a lot of times I'll be in a place where I'll be like, I'm pretty sure I can get this done in 6 weeks. And I'll set the time frame like 4 months from now.
Yeah, that's what we need to do.
And so then I'll be like, usually it means that people get their stuff early. Like with the last Cthulhu campaign, I just did one reprinting the first 2 issues. And I said people were going to get their stuff in May or June, I think, maybe even June, I said. But I actually had it done before the campaign because it was a reprint. The whole thing was already done. So I already had it printed before the campaign even ended. So when the campaign, as soon as I got the money from Kickstarter, I mailed the stuff out. And I've had a couple people be like, oh my goodness, I got the thing already. And I was like, yeah, well, I knew I was going to have it out that early, but just in case something weird happened, I set the deadline like 3 months from now. And so now everyone's really happy because they got it early. Even though my internal timeline, that was when I was going to get it out all along. There have been a couple times where I there was one issue quest, I forget which one, but I set it like 5 months in advance. And honestly, I just got super burnt out. And I basically took like 6 weeks off from doing comics right in the middle of it just to recuperate. And so I used that whole time.
I just saw Greg's face.
But it was still on time. Yeah.
I just saw Greg's face go, yeah, I totally have no idea what that feels like being totally burnt out.
But because I had set it so far in the future, I was still able to get it out on time. It was just 2 months later than I thought it was going to be. But for the backers, it still got there on time. So I always just set that way in the future. So yeah.
So for it was like 2, 3, 4 years. It's a blur. So we had Seer Chronicles issues 1 and 2. And the second issue was supposed to be the artist for the second issue was supposed to remaster the first issue. He couldn't, so we had to find another artist. So that's what took like a little longer to get both of those done.
Which we didn't, by the way, we didn't get informed of until like when he was almost done with the second issue. So like we basically found out like while we're launching the Kickstarter that like, oh, like we thought that was basically already going to get started. Like you're not even going to be available for it. And we thought it'd be quicker because everything's already drawn up. You're just redrawing it. So it's like you already have panels and everything to emulate. Like you know, there's no guesswork. And instead it was like, oh no, we have to go find and vet an artist and do all this. We had to that was definitely the hardest one.
So then those finally got done. And around the time that those were ready to get shipped out, also our horror anthology, Chronicles of Horror 1 and 2, was done. So in November, December of that year, I mailed out all of that at the same time, all by myself. And I'm like, I'll never do that again. Like, I'll never be like put myself in that spot again, because that was insane. So, for
Yeah,
Night
that
Watch,
sounds. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. But yeah, for Night Watch, that's on Kickstarter right now. Like, we have it for August, like the estimated shipping date. So I'm hoping that the book's already done, which is like one of the first that we've had like actually all done before the Kickstarter so far. So I'm hoping that I can get all the rewards and ship it out like way ahead of time, because that would be amazing.
I was noticing like it's fun that you got all these. You got like you got verified backer, favorite, repeat creator, super backer. Now I want a bunch of badges.
I wish it was easier for people to see those.
Yeah, you think like they would like put those like on the, like if you go to the comics discovery page, you think it'd be cool to see those like as like categories underneath the comic, like on
exactly. So I mean, I always put like a screenshot thing in the campaign page to show backers favorite, so I can highlight that. But it would be nice if it just popped up like, oh, when you have my name over there on the right side. It would be nice if it said backers favorite right all the time on the screen, so people going to your campaign that are new don't even have to look through your campaign for it. They can say, oh, there it is. Or that if they even knew what that means, because most people don't even know what that badge is.
It's one of those things where like even like the blue check marks on social media accounts, like even if you don't know what it means, you see the check mark, it's clear that means some prestigiousness, some trustworthiness. Like that's really what it's about. It's kind of like if you land on a website for some service provider of any type and they have a bunch of logos all over it that aren't theirs, you're like, wow, they must have worked with a lot of people or got a lot of rewards or whatever it might be. It's just this prestigiousness that it stands out amongst the crowd. But Greg, I also just noticed we actually do have the backers favorite.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Great.
I don't think we did. I think that's very recent. So like that's super cool. I was looking because I was curious. Do we have the other ones?
Well, we have Super Backer because I back so many campaigns.
Yeah. Greg's like, I'm so broke. Here's more money.
You actually asked a question in our forum, and you're, I think, the first person that ever did that so far.
Oh,
so, yeah, which is cool. And Dylan will be able to answer this because he does marketing. So you said, what are your suggestions for promotion at a time when platforms limit engagement? And you have a TikTok. You also have a YouTube channel. So that's probably difficult to like try to share.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've noticed like, so my Crimebusters 6 I did last February, so it's been over a year since the last issue of this. I've had several other things since then, and that did really well. That was by far the best I've done on Crimebusters. But I'm anticipating issue 7. I'm going to have a like way down. That's just my guess. And the big thing is that was the last campaign I did where it felt like anything I was doing was reaching people. All the campaigns I've done since then, across the board, but particularly stuff from Meta like Facebook and Instagram, doesn't matter what I post on there. Nobody's seeing it unless I'm paying to have it boosted. And it's become really difficult to just drive people, to just let people even know the campaign exists. My last issue of Quest, I had 132 backers, and I think only 9 of them were new backers. All the rest of them were returning backers from previous Quest campaigns. And that's great. But usually it's like 60-40. And if I had that plus a 40% new backers like I used to get, I would have had my best campaign ever. But instead, it was just nobody knew it was there, other than the people that have already backed me before. So people on my mailing list are people on Kickstarter that I'm messaging previous campaigns that they knew about it. But I was just like, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, YouTube. I was trying all the stuff, and just it wasn't reaching anybody. Nobody was seeing it. And so I'm not really sure what to do in terms of marketing, other than paid advertisements, to get people to even know the comic exists.
Yeah. So I can't really say anything about TikTok because the only thing I share on TikTok are, I don't know, like trailers from our Kickstarters or our podcast clips. But there's Alex of Lucky 33. He just does other stuff, and he doesn't just talk about his comics all the time. So if you story tell and say other shit, that's like, yeah, we are doing a garage sale today, and then like, oh, by the way, I'm that nerd that fucking makes Lucky 33 comics, like astronaut high schooler and stuff. And then they'll be like, oh, so you have comics, and then like maybe every other video or something, he'll have a link to his shop. Yeah, I get TikTok's a little different than Meta, because if you put a Kickstarter link, I think it was the last campaign we did, not Seer Chronicles, but like last year. If you put a Kickstarter link in the comments, they would like remove the post. They're like, no, because you're bringing them to another website. You're taking them off of Facebook, which they don't want to happen. So, which that's a business. But Zuckerberg can go fuck himself. So,
so here's the thing too. Everyone has to understand that when people get upset at Facebook, Meta, Instagram, Facebook, that they're thinking that Facebook's like suppressing what people see on your stuff. But you have to understand there are 3 billion users on that platform or more. And so what'll happen is me as a user, I can only mentally keep track of about 1,000 people in my entire life. Like any human being, like there are varying capacities per person based on various brain capacities, or if you train to memorize things or anything like that. But you really only can keep track of about 1,000 people in your entire life, let alone on a social platform where you follow 10,000 people. So one of the biggest issues is Facebook creates their platform, and friends hop on first, right? And even Facebook has a friend limit of 5,000. I don't know if anybody knows that, but if you hit 5,000, you cannot accept any more friend requests anymore. Like people can try, but nothing will happen. You can't accept them. And that's why they created the Facebook pages for brands, where a person could then convert their page into a Facebook page, or their profile into a Facebook page. And these pages were meant to be for people who have larger than that 5,000 friends into followers. And now you have one person who has potentially up to 5,000 friends, but most people have 500. Now imagine of those 500, even just 1% of them posts every single day. That's 5 posts a day times 365, posts a year. So what is that? 5 times 365. That is 1,800 pieces of content that they would have to filter throughout the year, assuming they went every single day to the platform. They would only have to look at 5. So most people don't. Most people aren't on Facebook every single day, the majority of people. But if you want to stand out, that's what you're competing with. That is the baseline of what you're competing with. That is not assuming that they don't follow any Facebook pages. They're not in any Facebook groups. They're not part of like the Facebook marketplace and they're going shopping on there. And the ads that have to get delivered, or Facebook can't pay for their servers, right? That's why Facebook rewards posts that keep, like if you create an ad on Facebook and the ad doesn't take them off of Facebook, it costs less money than if it takes them off of Facebook, because what happens is they lose money. So of course they're going to charge you more. So the way that you want to create content, and this isn't just for Meta, this is kind of a universal thing, like Greg mentioned earlier. By creating consistent content that is just valuable, and valuable means inspiring, educational, or entertaining. If you're not creating something in that realm all the time, no one's going to see your content, because if all of your content is promotional, like think about it. If you hopped onto Facebook and every post was like an ad from Coca-Cola, you'd be like, okay, why am I here? You'd leave. So Facebook doesn't reward those types of posts. But if you post a funny meme and your friends laugh at it and then they share it, all of a sudden they're going to say, okay, that was good. We'll maybe consider the next post. So you do it again, right? And you do it again. Now imagine if you were like, here's a funny post and here's an ad. Here's a funny post and here's an ad. If you do that over and over and over again, Facebook learns that you're not creating valuable content and they'll stop sharing even the funny ones. So in order to break out of this cycle, creators that want to get their voice out there need to start sharing valuable content. And again, valuable doesn't mean you're solving some problem. It means you're inspiring, entertaining, or educating. And there's tons of different ways to do that across every single industry. There's not an industry that can't do all three or at least one of those three. And so now that you know that, the whole goal is how can I create as much content as possible in those spaces? And then when I want to ask for something, how should I go about it? And so that's like, those are the types of questions that people need to ask, as opposed to how do I get people to see my content? It's like, how can I share content that people want to see? That's the question that most creators don't think to ask. And so like one of the things I just did a second ago, whoops, here we go. Yeah, what is this over here? Oh, wow, this actually created it for us. That's so funny. Yeah, this is all too much content on the other end. Let's see, looking through this, hooks. Yeah, so like here would be another example of something else to consider. So now you've got this inspire, educate, entertain. It's like, okay, so then what else does Facebook care about? And this is now, so now it's like I can serve my audience, but now what does Facebook care about so that I know they'll deliver to my audience? So Facebook cares about how long somebody is on the app and how much content they look at, right? So one of the golden ways to do this is video content where somebody watches more than 3 seconds of your content, right? 1, 2, 3. Like that's a lot longer than it sounds. And the whole idea is that it's like I watched my little brother on TikTok and he's just like this. I'm like, how are you even digesting whatever the hell you just scrolled past?
Like Instagram, I'm just not.
It's crazy. And that's how a ton of people are. So now that you know that, it's like, okay, so not only do I have to provide the inspiration, education, or entertainment, I also need to get them to stop in their tracks and look at me. And the only way to do that is through what's called a hook, something that pulls them in and goes, whoa, what was that? Because they are staring at a wall of just nonsense all day long. So to share an example of what a hook can be to like a weird extreme, like it could just be something like, hey, wait, right? Like those are those things that kind of get people's attention. It's a fast movement. There's random ones. People start doing this, like they grab a random thing and they start talking into it like it's a microphone. It's like, what is that? You know what I mean? Is that his phone? Like, is he using the phone? It's like, yeah, so I was doing this the other day. It's like, what are you doing? Like, and our brains are just like correcting and going, that's strange. This is out of place. What is that? And we pique curiosity, right? There's a guy named Russell Brunson who talks about, or he built ClickFunnels. So this is just a platform where you build sales funnels. And his whole thing is, in order to sell something, you need a hook, a story, and an offer. And that hook is the thing that gets them to stop to spend any time digesting the story. And he literally would create 12 pieces of content per week to test it out on his paid ads. So he would be paying ads and then run this. He had a friend he was competing selling books with. They both had they're nonfiction books, but they're releasing books at the same time and they're trying to compete. And the other guy is selling more, but has a smaller following. He's like, how are you doing that? And he's like, I'm creating tons of content. He's like, well, how much are you creating? I'm doing 12 a week. He's like, oh, that's why. He's like, why? I'm doing 12 a day, 12 pieces of content a day. He is mass producing it, not because by creating more content, you'll be seen, but by creating more content, you're more likely to find that hook and that story that actually pulls somebody in and makes them watch the whole thing or read the whole thing or consume whatever it is that you're presenting to them. So one of Russell's stories was that one of his best ads is him. So he's got his book. He's trying to sell his book. And he's in the middle of the desert in a Jeep. And he's holding his book. And it's completely on fire. And the ad starts off, hey, I'm Russell Brunson. And this is my book. And it's on fire. Right? Your brain cannot comprehend what just happened. You're like, what is going on? And then he starts talking. He's got your attention already. You're very curious what he's about to tell you about. And so that's what creators need to do. It's so funny. Like we reserve our creativity for our art, our comic book, for example. right? Musicians do this. They reserve it for their songs, right? Painters do this. Everybody does this in their art, but they don't realize that entrepreneurship and marketing are also arts. You have to be creative in them. You still have to go by the numbers. Like you need to get a certain number of views, a certain number of emails, a certain number of sales, but you need to do it. The way that you do it is creatively. You have to figure out like, what's that thing that gets my audience's attention? Nobody watched this video. Okay, let me do the same video, but I'll make 3 different versions of the intro, 12 different versions of the intro, and I'll put them all out at the same time and see which one sticks. So if you're wondering about like platforms, Gary Vaynerchuk, owner of VaynerMedia, fastest growing digital marketing company in the world, right? Worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He talks about how when you create all this content, right? So he basically says you spend 80% of your time on the platform that's working, 20% everywhere else, right? Which I also agree with. It's the 80-20 principle or Pareto's principle, right? You want to find that one platform that's really pulling your eyes. If it's TikTok at the moment, use TikTok. If it's Facebook, if it's Instagram, if it's Twitter, if it's Blue Sky, it doesn't matter where it is, right? So you go to these different platforms, spend most of your time there because you don't want to be wasting your time everywhere else. But then make sure to dabble on the other platforms. So now when you're wondering like what platforms to use, first off, TikTok is a great one for testing. If you don't want to post 15 posts on Instagram because it'll ruin your feed, post 15 times on TikTok, similar videos, different hooks, maybe different story. And now that you've tested all of them, which one stood out? Take that one, put only that one on Instagram. And now you're only putting your best content on Instagram, not all of your content, because you're only creating one piece of content every 3 days, right? So that's kind of the idea. It's like mass create content, even if it's just, again, that first second of the video is just different, just enough to grab someone's attention, and then mass produce it. Meta, for example, Facebook specifically, Gary Vaynerchuk said that it is his fastest growing platform right now as of 2025. And now that sounds weird because we all heard that Facebook's dying compared to all the other social platforms. Nobody uses Facebook anymore. I'm telling you right now, that is a lie. I run Facebook ads for clients. They make money with it. Facebook is 100% not dead. It is not only used for older people, younger people still use it as well. And the reason why Facebook is where he's growing fastest is because everybody else thinks Facebook's dying. So they all stopped creating content for the platform. So now you have the largest platform on the internet and the creator pool has shrank, meaning you are more likely to stand out if you create good content. So we go back to TikTok, post 15 versions of the same content with different hooks, figure out the winner, post that onto Facebook Reels. Do it again, do it again, do it again, over and over again until Facebook starts to go, oh, he's trying to actually create valuable content that's going to draw users in. They're going to watch the whole thing so that when it's all done and I show them an ad, they'll stick around to watch more of the video. And that's basically how you have to go about capturing people's eyes. I was busting on Greg about like this, like, what was it, 2 days ago? I'm like, we need to be creating more content like all the time. Like we like right now, he's like, man, we're not getting any reach. It's like, yeah, because we only posted one time in 2 days. Like we need 3 times a day. I just worked with a client in the food tech space, and he was creating like 1 post a day. I'm like, no, make it 3. I want 3 posts a day on both of these platforms. Like all the time. Like you cannot create too much content because Facebook already filters it for you, as we've seen. But if you get that one golden nugget of content, that's all you need to make everything else worth it. And like I said, you don't have to make it super complicated. You can make it as simple as, let's say you're doing an image post and you've got a border and it's blue. Cool. Make it 6 other colors and then repost it and see what happens. You know what I mean? And the evidence too that this works is that even when you're running paid advertising, there's a book called 1 Million Followers by Brandon Kane. And he worked with like top influencers as well as top like artists like Taylor Swift kind of thing. And one of the things that he talked about was basically, and this was written in 2019, so it's going to be a little bit different, but this idea still holds true. He was like, if you gave me $50,000, I can get you 1 million followers. And like, it's crazy because if you think about it, if you had 1 million real followers, wouldn't that be worth more than $50,000? It's just most people can't drop 50 grand, to do something like this. But the reason why he actually was able to come up with that number was what he did was, instead of having TikTok as a test subject, he would go to Facebook and he wouldn't post. He would create an ad, and then he'd make 7 variations of the ad, and then he'd run them all. And whichever ad did best, he would take that and then post it organically. So he was just testing using ads. We now have TikTok, so we don't even need those ads to do it. We can do it for free on TikTok. You just post a bunch of times on TikTok, and all of a sudden you're getting free data to go, oh, this is the one that's doing good. And then you just take that and post it on Facebook, post it on YouTube Shorts, post it on Instagram Reels or Instagram photos, depending on what you're posting, right? What's it called? TikTok does like photos and carousels as well. So that's kind of the way that you go about doing this. And again, it's very hard. Like I just said a second ago, we're not even doing that. But I watch the people who are successfully doing it. I work and consult with people that are doing this successfully. One of my good friends who's he's a social media marketer. That's what he does. He got 30,000 followers for a brand new account in like a month. Right. And all he's doing is it's mass content creation and testing, because you have no idea. That's the thing Gary Vee talks about. He talks about how you should document what you're doing. Don't create content, because then you can just mass create content, because you're always doing something. So just be like, oh, I'm doing this thing right now. Right. And then take a quote that you thought of and post it on Twitter, and then take a screenshot of that post and post that on Instagram, right? And then just voice memo your thoughts, and then put it across like a B-roll video on Canva. And all of a sudden you're just creating content by just doing your normal daily activities. And then you can just mass produce this stuff. After this episode, I'll send you 2 pieces of really good content that Gary Vee created. And Greg, we should put them in the show notes, like the description under in YouTube. But yeah, there's definitely a lot that you can do to grow on social media. But it's time consuming. It's like whether or not you want to take the time to do it, but it's absolutely possible. It's not impossible. Facebook doesn't hate creators and want them not to do it. It's just you're competing with 3 billion of them, right? That's the only thing. It's like there are just so many. And if I, as an individual, have 1,200 friends and I follow 700 businesses, they cannot possibly figure out what to show me unless that content does well when they test it. So they'll test it to like 1 to 3% of your audience. And if it does well, they'll test it to 3 to 5% of your audience. And if it does well, 10 to 15, and they just keep expanding as it does well. If it doesn't, they kill it they kill it before it starts to grow. So, that's the whole idea. It's like, you don't know what's going to work. Facebook doesn't know what's going to work. So give Facebook, Instagram, all of these platforms, give them all the resources and go, which one of these is going to work? And be like, we'll let our algorithms figure it out. It's like, this one seems to work. You're like, great. And then if you do want to do something like boost it or, run ads against it, you also are boosting the one that works. So instead of running ads against a post that's not working, you're only running them on something that already works. So it'll get more views for less money. Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, I appreciate the tips.
Heck yeah. Now we got a huge clip at the end of this, Greg, to be like, hey, here's marketing 101 on social media. Yeah.
Let's then go on TikTok.
Yeah, exactly. We clip these videos, put them on TikTok.
Yeah. So, yeah, where can people find you? And the Crimebusters Kickstarter, that's going to be in the description. And this will be out Wednesday of next week.
Oh, well, that's perfect, because Crimebusters 7 is launching on April 22nd, Tuesday, April 22nd. And then once that's done and sent to the printer, we'll be launching Quest number 5. That'll probably be the beginning of June for that. But the pre-launch page for that is up at questcomicbook.com. You can find all my stuff at crimebustercomics.com. You can find me on YouTube. I'm the Classic Comic Collector on YouTube. Or you can find me on TikTok. I've already forgotten what my handle is there. It's the Crimebusters, I think. Yeah. Or it might be Crimebuster Comics. On Instagram, it's _Crimebusters. But I think on TikTok, it's Crimebuster Comics. And on YouTube and on TikTok to a lesser degree, most of what I'm talking about is actually back issues. I'm a big collector So I'm showing off a lot of back issues, but we also do live streams for my launches and occasionally interview other creators and things like that. But if you're into back issues, you come take a look at that.
Cool.
And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Definitely.